They laughed at him when he told them about the house, said it was a ruin, a pile of rocks left to rot on the edge of nowhere. The lawyer even smirked when handing him the yellowed deed, like a man delivering a joke that only he understood. But as the father drove through the winding autumn roads with his son asleep beside him, the mountains turned golden and silent, and for the first time in months, he felt something flicker, something that wasn't hunger or shame, hope, maybe, or the quiet sense that the world still owed him one surprise. By the time the road ended, the light had thinned to amber glass. They walked the rest of the way on foot, boots sinking into damp leaves. The air smelled of rain and smoke, the kind of air that felt older than people. When they reached the clearing, the house rose from the earth like it had been waiting. Gray stone walls half collapsed, ivy choking its windows. A roof caved in on one side. The boy stared at it, wide-eyed. "This is it?" he asked. The father nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said softly. "This is it." It was worse inside. The air was thick with dust and quiet, broken furniture scattered like bones. Wind whistled through cracks in the ceiling. The boy kicked a stone, sending echoes into the dark. "Doesn't look like much of a home," he said. The father smiled faintly. "Neither did the shelters," he replied. "But we made it work." He ran his hand over the cold wall. The stone felt warm beneath his touch, just faintly, impossibly. He frowned, pressing his palm harder. "Strange," he murmured. The boy tilted his head. "What?" "It feels alive," the father whispered. They set up camp by the hearth, their small fire barely holding against the draft. The boy fell asleep curled under a thin blanket, his small hands gripping the stuffed dog he carried everywhere. The father sat awake, watching the flames claw upward, their light reflecting off the stone walls. Something about the house unsettled him. It was old, yes, but not empty. He could feel it watching, listening. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees, carrying faint whispers of rain. He closed his eyes and thought about his grandfather, the man who had built this place and never left. Morning arrived slow and gray. The father stepped outside, stretching stiff muscles, and breathed the mountain air. It was sharp, almost metallic. Mist drifted low over the trees. The house looked different in daylight, less broken, more patient, like a creature waking from a long sleep. The boy joined him, hair messy, rubbing his eyes. "You think Grandpa really lived here?" he asked. "For a while," his father said. "He left before I was born." "Why?" The man hesitated. "No one really knows. People said he went crazy, talked about gold, buried in stone, lights in the ground. Nobody believed him. They spent the day clearing the front room. Dust rose in shimmering clouds, catching the autumn light that filtered through cracks in the wall. Beneath the grime, the place began to reveal itself. Carvings in the stone lintels, a fireplace built with impossible precision, a floor that didn't creak but thrummed faintly, like distant thunder. The boy knelt by one of the carvings. "What's this?" he asked, tracing his finger over a spiral etched deep into the stone. The father crouched beside him. "Looks like a symbol," he murmured. It pulsed faintly under his touch, like the rhythm of a slow heartbeat. That night, the wind grew wild. The shutters banged like warning drums. The fire sputtered low. The boy stirred, half awake. "Dad?" he whispered. "It's singing." The father frowned. "What is?" "The wall," the boy said. The man listened, and heard it too. A faint hum, low and steady, weaving through the howling wind. It wasn't threatening. It sounded sad. He pressed his ear to the wall and thought he could almost hear words buried in stone, a melody older than memory. He whispered into the dark, "Grandpa, what did you build here?" The humming deepened, as if answering, "Find out." In the morning, they discovered something new. A section of the floor near the fireplace had shifted slightly during the storm, leaving a hairline crack. The boy noticed first, crouching beside it. "Dad, look." The father pried at it with a rusted poker until a small square tile lifted free, revealing darkness below. "A crawl space," he murmured. But when he lowered his lantern, it wasn't dirt he saw. It was stone stairs descending into shadow. The boy's eyes widened. "A basement?" The father hesitated. "I didn't see one on the plans." He met his son's gaze. "You ready to find out?" The steps were narrow and cold, slick with damp air that smelled of earth and iron. Their lantern light flickered across walls carved smooth, lined with strange markings that repeated the spiral pattern from upstairs. The boy's hand clung tight to his father's coat. "Feels weird," he said quietly, "like we're walking inside a heartbeat." The father smiled despite himself. "You and your imagination." But he felt it too. A rhythm in the air, a faint vibration that matched the pulse at his wrist. When they reached the bottom, the passage opened into a small circular room built entirely of stone. In the center of that room sat a chest. It was massive, forged from black iron, edges gilded faintly, its surface covered in the same spiral symbols. Dust coated every inch, but the air around it shimmered faintly, as if holding breath. The boy stared in awe. "Is that gold?" "Not yet," the father said, forcing a laugh to mask his unease. He knelt beside the chest, testing the lock, rusted but intact. "Guess we need a key." The boy frowned. "You think Grandpa left one?" The father exhaled. If he built this place, he left everything for a reason. Back upstairs, they searched every crevice, the drawers, the attic, even behind loose bricks. Nothing. Until finally, the boy lifted an old photo frame from the wall. The glass had cracked long ago, but behind it, taped to the back, was a small brass key. He grinned. "Maybe it's magic." The father smiled. "Maybe it's just luck." But when he held it, the air seemed to shift again, that same hum rising softly from the floor. He glanced around, uneasy. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was alive, waiting, as if it knew what he planned to do next. They returned to the cellar. The key fit perfectly, turning with a groan that echoed through the walls. The lid resisted for a moment, then opened with a sigh of trapped centuries. Inside lay stacks of something wrapped in oilcloth. The boy reached for one, and his father stopped him. "Wait." Carefully he peeled it back. Gold, thick bars, dull with age but unmistakable. His breath caught. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. His heart pounded. "Is it real?" the boy whispered. The father laughed, half in disbelief, half in awe. "Real enough to change everything." They sat in stunned silence, staring at the impossible treasure. For a man who had counted every dollar, every sandwich, every night's shelter, this was beyond comprehension. But beneath the thrill, he felt something else. Unease. Why would his grandfather hide such fortune here and leave it to him? The boy was smiling, eyes wide. "We're rich," he said. The father forced a smile. "Maybe, but this feels too easy." He lifted one bar. It was cold, heavy, but beneath the metal, he swore he heard the faint hum again, deeper now, like the gold itself was breathing. That night, Sleep was impossible. The boy dreamed aloud, talking about all the things they could buy: a house in the city, warm clothes, a real bed. The father sat awake by the dying fire, the gold bar on the table beside him. In the flickering light, it almost seemed to move. He touched it, and a flash of warmth spread through his arm, up into his chest. A whisper followed, low, distant, but clear. You cannot keep what was never taken. He jerked his hand back, heart hammering. The house creaked in response, as though reminding him it was listening. At dawn, he went outside to think. The valley was cloaked in fog, sunlight bleeding through in fractured gold. The boy followed quietly, clutching his stuffed toy. "What's wrong, Dad?" The father smiled faintly. "Nothing, just thinking." "About the gold?" He nodded. "About what it means." The boy frowned. "It means we can live." The father looked toward the mountains, their peaks burning orange. "Yeah," he said softly, "but maybe it's not just for us." The boy tilted his head. "You mean like a gift?" The man nodded. "Or a test." He decided to read the rest of the papers in the attic. Between old receipts and yellowed letters, he found a sealed envelope with his grandfather's name on it. Inside was a note written in that sharp, deliberate hand he recognized from childhood photographs. "If you're reading this, you found it. The gold isn't wealth, it's memory. Each bar forged from the earth's core, charged with energy too wild for greed. Guard it. Use it to build, not destroy." The father read it twice, then 3 times. At the bottom, one final line: "You will be mocked, but you will know." That line struck deep. He thought of all the laughter, the disbelief when he'd mentioned the inheritance. Everyone assumed he'd been handed junk, a joke from a dead man. And maybe they were right. Until now. He held the note close, feeling the ink's grooves beneath his thumb. The boy peeked over his shoulder. "What's it say?" "It says we're supposed to protect it." The boy blinked. "Protect gold? From who?" The father looked out the window, where wind stirred the dying leaves. "Maybe not from people," he said softly. "Maybe from ourselves." In the following days, they began restoring the house properly, fixing the roof, sealing cracks, scrubbing decades of dust from the stone floors. The warmth grew steadier, richer. The boy laughed more, sang sometimes while sweeping. The father realized he hadn't heard that sound in months. But still, at night, he felt the gold's pull from below, the soft hum calling through the floor. Once, when he stood above the cellar, he felt the boards vibrate beneath his feet. It wasn't menacing. It was expectant, as if asking, "What will you do with what you've found?" One morning, as they gathered water from the stream, they heard voices echoing through the valley. Strangers. 2 hikers, maybe, but their laughter had a sharpness that didn't belong here. The father tensed, instinctively shielding his son. "People?" the boy asked. "Yeah," he said, voice tight. "Let's stay inside." That evening, as they watched from the window, faint lights appeared on the ridge, flashlights cutting through fog. The father clenched his jaw. Word had spread. He didn't know how, but secrets this big never stayed buried. He whispered to the house, "Keep us safe," and the walls answered with a low hum. The intruders didn't come close that night, but their presence lingered like smoke. The father couldn't shake the fear. Gold drew hunger. Hunger drew ruin. He spent hours staring at the note, the words, "Use it to build, not destroy," echoing in his head. The boy found him there, pale in lantern light. "Dad," he said gently, "you look scared." The father smiled weakly. "I'm just trying to figure out how to be someone good." The boy leaned against him. "You already are." The man's throat tightened. "Then I hope the mountain agrees." Over the next days, he noticed something strange. The gold bars, when exposed to sunlight, reflected not yellow, but faint white light, soft and pulsing, like a heartbeat. The boy called it the glow. The father studied it in awe. "Maybe that's what he meant by energy," he murmured. When he touched it now, there was no whisper, only warmth. The boy asked if it was safe. "Safe if we keep it that way," the man replied. "But it's not meant for selling. It's meant for remembering." "Remembering what?" the boy asked. "That some things are worth more than money." Autumn deepened, painting the mountains in fire. The days grew shorter, the air cooler. The father spent evenings on the porch, watching mist gather in the valley. The boy, asleep, beside him. Sometimes he thought he saw faint light seeping from the cracks in the house's foundation, pulsing gently, as if the mountain itself had joined in the house's breathing. He didn't know if it was real or imagination, but it filled him with calm. He whispered, "You were right, old man. This isn't a curse. It's a covenant." The wind stirred, carrying a single falling leaf to his lap. Then, one cold morning, they woke to find footprints near the door, heavy boots, fresh. The father froze, then knelt, tracing the edges. "They've found us," he whispered. The boy gripped his arm. "What do we do?" "We trust the mountain," the father said. That night, the air hummed louder. The gold below glowed faintly through the floorboards. The walls thrummed like a drumbeat, and when faint voices approached again, men whispering, flashlights slicing the dark, they stopped short at the edge of the clearing, turning back suddenly, muttering about dizziness and cold. The father smiled. "It's protecting us," he said. The boy beamed. "Then we're safe." The father nodded, but deep down he knew safety was temporary. Word would spread further. Greed would grow stronger. He had to make a choice. That night, he returned to the cellar alone. The gold shimmered faintly under lantern light, the spirals on the walls glowing in rhythm. "You were never meant for men like me," he whispered. "You belong to the earth." He placed the key beside the chest and stepped back. The ground rumbled softly, and the floor sealed over, smooth as untouched stone. The house exhaled, calm and complete. When he came back upstairs, the boy was waiting. "You gave it back, didn't you?" he asked. The father hesitated. "How'd you know?" The boy smiled. "Because it's quieter now." The father laughed softly, ruffling his hair. "You're too smart for your own good." The boy grinned. "Takes after you." They sat by the fire, silence wrapping around them. For the first time, he didn't feel poor. He didn't feel lost. He felt whole. "You know," he said, "gold can't buy peace." The boy nodded. "But it can teach it?" The man smiled. "Yeah, maybe it can." Weeks passed peacefully. The leaves fell, covering the yard like copper coins. The boy built a swing from an old rope. Laughter echoed through the valley. Sometimes travelers wandered close, curious about the glow they claimed to see on the ridge, but none found the path. The mountain had chosen its guardians well. At night, as the father tucked his son into bed, he whispered, "You'll remember this place, won't you?" "Always," the boy said. "It's where we found home." And the father knew then that was the real treasure his grandfather had left behind. One evening, as twilight bled into dusk, he took the old note and placed it above the fireplace. The firelight illuminated the words, "Use it to build, not destroy." He smiled. The gold was gone, yes, but something golden remained. The warmth, the stillness, the sense of belonging. The boy joined him, pointing toward the fading sky. "Look, Dad, the stars came out early tonight." He nodded. "Maybe they're watching." The boy smiled sleepily. "Or saying thank you." The man whispered, "No, kiddo, it's me saying thank you." The fire crackled softly, its glow like a quiet heartbeat in the dark. As the first snow began to fall, the house seemed to sigh contentedly. The father sat on the porch, wrapped in an old coat, listening to the hush of winter's approach. The boy slept inside, dreaming of mountains and golden light. The man looked toward the valley, remembering every road that had led him here, every night in the cold, every moment he thought he'd failed. Maybe fate wasn't punishment, but patience. Maybe redemption was just remembering to listen when the world finally went quiet. He closed his eyes, smiling. The hum beneath the house matched his heartbeat perfectly. Years later, they would say a homeless man once inherited a crumbling stone house and found nothing inside but dust. They would laugh, shake their heads, call it another story of bad luck. No one would speak of the light that lingered there, or the warmth that defied snow, or the boy who grew up believing in miracles made of stone. But in that valley, the mountain still breathed, faintly glowing under moonlight. It remembered. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, it whispered his name. Because not all treasure shines. Some of it hums quietly beneath the earth, waiting for the right hands to let it rest. And some inheritances aren't meant to be spent. They're meant to be understood. For the father and his son, the gold had never been the prize. The gift was the peace that came from giving it back. And as the autumn leaves returned the next year, dancing through the ruins like blessings, the house stood steadfast, a monument not to fortune, but to faith. Winter came quietly, as if afraid to disturb the valley's peace. Snow drifted over the roof of the old stone house, softening its edges, erasing every sign of ruin. The father stood at the porch, wrapped in his worn coat, watching his son carve patterns in the snow. The world around them glowed, faintly gold, beneath the overcast sky. The hum within the earth had become part of their days, a rhythm they no longer feared, a quiet reminder that they belonged here. He breathed deeply, the cold air burning his lungs, but it was a good burn, clean, real, grounding. The boy ran to him, cheeks flushed red. "Dad, look," he said, holding up a smooth stone shaped like a heart. The father smiled. "Guess the mountain's still giving gifts?" The boy pocketed it proudly, unaware of the irony in those words. They spent the day gathering firewood, laughing, talking about nothing. But beneath that warmth, the father felt unease, a faint tug in his chest that he couldn't name. The mountain was calm, yes, but too calm. The hum beneath the ground had changed tone, lower, heavier, like something waiting, watching, preparing. 3 days later, it came. A black SUV appeared at the base of the ridge, an intrusion of steel and noise in a world made of silence. 2 men stepped out in thick coats, carrying radios that crackled in the cold. The father saw them from the tree line, heart hammering. He recognized the type. Government issue, surveyors or inspectors. They moved with purpose, scanning the landscape, talking in clipped phrases. The boy whispered, "Are they bad men?" The father didn't answer. He only watched as one of them lifted a metal detector that began to beep faintly near the stream. His pulse froze. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring at the old letter from his grandfather, the one warning him to protect the mountain secret. "You will be mocked, but you will know." The words seemed to shimmer in the firelight. He thought of what would happen if those men found the gold, if they tore open the earth to claim what wasn't theirs. It wouldn't just end their peace. It would end something sacred. "Dad?" The boy's voice was small. "What if they find it?" The man exhaled slowly. "Then we'll remind the mountain who it belongs to." By morning, the valley was buzzing with unfamiliar noise. Trucks, drills, the sound of men shouting over radios. The father crouched behind the rocks near the stream, watching in disbelief as more vehicles arrived. The intruders had set up camp. "Exploratory survey," one of them said, their words carried on the wind. "Old mineral claims." But the father knew better. He recognized greed when he heard it. It always came disguised as purpose. He clenched his fists. The boy tugged his sleeve. "We can't stop them." The father looked at the mountain peaks glowing in early sunlight. "Maybe we can't," he said, "but something can." That evening, the wind began to change. It howled through the valley, like a voice, returning home. The boy pressed against the window, wide-eyed. "Dad, listen, it's louder." And indeed, the hum beneath their feet was rising, steady as a drumbeat. The fire flickered wildly, shadows dancing like restless spirits. The father stepped outside into the storm, snow whipping against his face. He whispered to the ground, to the air, to his grandfather. "If you're still here, help us." The wind surged, bending the trees, and from deep within the mountain came a low, thunderous rumble that shook the earth. The next morning, the intruders were gone. Their equipment lay scattered, tents ripped apart, tire tracks leading back down the ridge. No signs of violence, just chaos, as if they'd fled in panic. The father and son walked the clearing in silence. The air smelled of ozone. The snow melted in strange circular patches, revealing golden light flickering beneath the surface. "What happened?" the boy whispered. The father looked around slowly, awe replacing fear. "The mountain remembered," he said softly. "It knows how to protect itself." But the peace that followed was uneasy. For days, fog hung thick over the valley, muting the world into gray silence. The boy started having dreams of men digging, of golden rivers running through stone, of his grandfather whispering from beneath the earth. He'd wake crying, trembling. The father held him close. "It's just dreams," he'd whisper, though even he wasn't sure, because sometimes, in the quiet after midnight, he too could hear faint whispers in the floorboards, soft, rhythmic, like words spoken in a language the living no longer knew. Then came the letter, delivered by hand. A stranger on horseback, old-fashioned and out of place. He said nothing, just handed the folded paper to the father and left. The paper smelled faintly of pine and smoke, the handwriting familiar. It was his grandfather's again. "You've done well," it read, "but every guardian must make a choice. The gold will sleep only while it remains unseen. When men come with their hunger again, and they will, You must decide whether to destroy it or let it consume the world. The father's hands trembled. Destroy it? He read the words again. Fire frees truth. He showed the letter to his son, who read it with furrowed brows. Destroy it? But why? The father sighed. Maybe because no man should have it. Maybe because it's not ours to keep. The boy shook his head. But Grandpa said to protect it. Protecting something, the man said quietly, sometimes means letting it go. That night, he dreamed of fire, of the mountain glowing red, the gold melting like sunlit water, the hum turning into a song. When he woke, the air was warm, almost too warm, though snow still covered the ground. He took it as a sign. The mountain was speaking again, waiting for his choice. But before he could act, the men returned, this time with more vehicles, armed guards, and equipment. They weren't explorers now. They were claiming ownership. The leader, a tall man in a black coat, introduced himself at the gate. Mr. Allen, he said smoothly, Federal Geological Division. We have reason to believe there are dangerous materials beneath your land. The father's jaw tightened. Dangerous to whom? To everyone. The man replied, smiling without warmth. You should cooperate. It's for the greater good. That night, the father couldn't rest. The boy sat by the window, staring at the rows of lights flickering on the ridge. They're digging again, he whispered. The father nodded grimly. Then we don't have much time. He opened the trapdoor to the cellar, feeling the faint vibration of the sealed floor. The hum had grown angry, pulsing like a warning. It's waking, he said softly. The mountain doesn't want this. He took his son's hand. If something happens to me, promise me you'll run. Don't look back. The boy's voice cracked. No, Dad. Don't say that. Promise, the man said. When dawn came, smoke already curled from the ridge where the men had begun drilling. The sound was unbearable, a violation of silence. The father climbed the path, heart heavy, until he reached the first machine. You need to stop, he said, voice steady. The leader turned, amused. Or what? The father met his gaze. Or the mountain will. The man laughed, but his laughter died as the ground beneath them began to tremble. Snow slid from the slopes like sand. You feel that? The father shouted over the rising roar. That's your warning. The machines groaned, metal twisting under unseen pressure. The men scrambled, shouting orders, trying to shut everything down. But it was too late. A blinding light burst from the ground. Pure gold, but not solid. Liquid light, streaming upward like a fountain. The father shielded his eyes. The hum turned deafening, vibrating through every bone in his body. Dad! The boy screamed from below, running toward him. No! He shouted, waving him back. The light pulsed again, and in that instant, the father understood. This wasn't gold. It was energy, memory, the soul of the mountain itself rising in defense. He remembered the letter's final words. Fire frees truth. And he knew what he had to do. The men fled, blinded by light, their machines smoking, but the father stayed. He turned toward his son, voice breaking. Get to the house. Dad, go. The boy ran, sobbing as the father pulled the torch from his pack, the same one they'd used on cold nights when the firewood was wet. He stepped into the golden mist and whispered, I'm sorry. Then he dropped the flame. The explosion wasn't violent. It was beautiful. A wave of light rolled through the valley, gold dissolving into white, snow melting, air shimmering. The noise was both silence and song. When the boy reached the porch, he turned back just in time to see his father disappear in the glow, his silhouette framed in fire. "Dad!" he cried, falling to his knees. But the light didn't burn. It spread gently, washing over everything like dawn. The hum reached a final crescendo, then faded into stillness. When he woke, the valley was silent again. The snow had melted entirely, leaving fields of green and gold wildflowers. The machines were gone, melted, dissolved, erased. The house stood untouched, glowing faintly in the sun. The boy stumbled toward the clearing, heart pounding, but there was no trace of his father, only a single golden stone at the spot where he'd stood. He knelt, trembling, and picked it up. It was warm. A spiral was etched into its surface. He pressed it to his chest, and for a brief moment, he heard a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Years passed. The boy became a man, but the memory of that light never faded. He rebuilt the house, tending the land as his father had, speaking to the wind as though it could still answer. And sometimes it did. When storms gathered, he'd feel warmth beneath his feet. When he was lonely, he'd hear a low hum rising through the floorboards. He never dug for the gold again. He didn't need to. The real treasure had been left in him, in the peace, in the knowing. One summer evening, a group of travelers wandered into the valley. Lost, exhausted, they begged for shelter. The man welcomed them, fed them, told stories by the fire. One of them noticed the strange markings carved into the stone walls. "What do they mean?" she asked. The man smiled faintly. "They're reminders," he said, "that not everything buried should be found." The travelers exchanged puzzled looks, but said nothing more. That night, they swore they heard faint singing in their dreams, soft, wordless, beautiful. Years turned to decades. The man grew old, his hair silver like frost. The valley remained untouched by time. No one came to claim it again. The world forgot, as the mountain had intended. But sometimes, when the wind blew from the north, faint golden light shimmered along the ridge, and those who saw it told tales of a ghost protecting a hidden fortune. The man would smile when he heard such stories. "Not a ghost," he'd whisper, "a promise." As autumn returned, the valley blazed with color once more. The man sat on the same porch where his father once had, the same hum beneath his feet. He held the golden stone in his hand, the last piece of what had once been unimaginable wealth, and thought of the man who'd given everything to protect it. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. "The mountain sleeps." The wind rose gently, swirling leaves around his feet. For a moment, he swore he heard a familiar voice whisper back, "And you kept it alive?" When he passed, the valley didn't mourn. It simply grew quiet, the way the world does when honoring a friend. The house remained, warm through the winters, blooming through the springs. Travelers who stumbled upon it spoke of laughter in the trees, of a feeling of being watched, not with fear, but care. And sometimes, deep at night, they said you could hear the hum again, steady, patient, eternal. Generations later, the story became a legend. A homeless man who inherited a ruined house, gold that was more than gold, a mountain that protected its own. Most dismissed it as myth, but among the few who believed, one detail never changed. They said the man's son still walks the ridge at dawn, seen only as a silhouette in the fog, guarding what remains. They say he listens to the hum, waiting for the next lost soul the mountain chooses to save. And perhaps he does, because some legacies aren't measured in riches or written in wills. They live in echoes, in the pulse of the land, in the stories whispered to the wind. The mountain doesn't forget. The earth holds its own kind of memory. It remembers those who gave more than they took, those who returned light to darkness. If you stand there today, at the heart of that valley, where gold once glowed like fire, you might still feel it, a faint vibration beneath your boots, the slow heartbeat of the world itself. And if you listen long enough, if you stand in silence and let the wind speak, you might hear a voice, low and familiar, carried through the pines. Guard it, it says, not for wealth, for peace. And then, maybe you'll understand why the house never fell, why the mountain never gave up its secret, why the boy, now part of the hum itself, still waits there in the light of endless autumn. Because his father didn't just save a secret, he saved a balance. And balance, once restored, cannot be broken. The crumbling stone house became a symbol, though few knew why. Artists painted it, travelers photographed it. The locals called it the house that glowed, and every autumn, when the sun hit the ridge just right, the walls shone gold again, not from treasure but from memory. They said the light came from within the stone, from something the earth refused to let die. They said it was love, carved into rock. And maybe they were right. Because if you looked closely, the spirals etched by 3 generations still shimmered faintly, alive, eternal. A promise kept long after the hands that made it were gone. In the end, no one found the gold, but the world gained something greater, a story passed from voice to voice of a man who had nothing, then chose to give everything. And though the world forgot his name, the mountain never did. Its hum remains, soft as a heartbeat, deep as forgiveness. And so the story ends where it began, with a man and his son, standing before a house built from stone and love, mocked by the world, but chosen by the earth. The mountain breathes, the hum continues, and if you listen closely enough, you'll hear it too. The quiet truth beneath all things, that some treasures are meant not to be kept, but to set us free.